to bring the lost to Jesus for membership in his family, to develop them into Christ-like maturity, to equip them for Christ's ministry on earth, to improve their quality of life, to be a ministry to the total man.
God bless you, my brothers and sisters. Again, it is with the joy of Jesus that I come bringing you a simple message, but one that is still true, that in these trying times in which we live, Jesus Christ, he is the answer for you. Yes, today's message is close to my heart because it really deals with what God has established for his people, and that is his meeting place for us. Israel had been enslaved for 200 years. The Egyptians had stripped them of their faith and their culture. So God raises up a man by the name of Moses. Moses leads them out into the wilderness where God could get them all to himself, that he could introduce himself and his mind, his way that he wanted man to relate to him. But while out there, God instructs Moses to establish a tabernacle, a place for him to meet his people. And this is what I want to talk to you about today. The church, the place to meet God. So won't you come on into the sacred sanctuary as we will continue discussing the church, that place for us to meet God.
I want you to read that one with me. Those that be planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall still bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing. I want to talk from the subject, God's house, a place to meet God. God's house, a place to meet God. The psalmist is giving us a psalm of praise. And he says to us, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. The palm tree you will always find in a tropical climate. Palm tree is a tall, beautiful tree. And you will see that the palm tree is much different than an oak. For a palm tree is able to bend with the wind, and as the wind changes, the palm tree is able to bend whatever direction that wind is blowing. And it does not lose its beauty. He goes on to say, he shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. When he talks about growth, he's not talking about your size, but he's talking about the quality of your life. Notice he tries to bring out that growth when he says, like a cedar in Lebanon. That cedar tree can get to be 80 feet tall. And its branches, especially if that cedar tree is standing alone, the branches can expand as far as 30 feet wide. And the beauty of a cedar of Lebanon is that even though that gigantic tree stands alone, there are those who can come and find shade under this gigantic tree. He's really saying to the righteous that will plant themselves in the house of God, you will be as beautiful as the tropical palm tree. Not only that, the quality of your life will grow like the great cedar of Lebanon. Something about that great cedar tree, they are rare and they're few and far between. You don't find them everywhere. You find them in Lebanon and certain climates like Turkey. But they're a unique tree. And what he's really saying, the righteous that are planted in the house of God, you're going to be a rare breed. And by you being planted in God's house, not only will you flourish and become a spiritual giant. Oh, I hear Jesus speaking to my mind when he says, out of your belly shall flow rivers. Otherwise, if you plant yourself in the house of God, that out of you will be rivers. Now, what is he talking about? Nourishment. Every major city, if you look well at it, it sits on a body of water, because water is essential for our existence. But I want to talk about being planted in God's house. And why? Because that's the place that we are to meet God. A house is a place of shelter from the wind, from the rain, from the snow, and from sleet. A place to find rest and relaxation. A place to refresh yourself when you're tired and when you're discouraged or just burdened. You're free to eat when your appetite calls for it, because that's your house. Your house where you can be yourself. You're able to let down your hair at your house. And you're able to take off your hair. Hang it up if you want to, because that is your house. But I want to talk to you today about God's house. The one place of shelter from life's burdens, where you can find rest for your soul. In my heart, in my mind, I look at the church as being an oasis. An oasis, as you already know, is a green space that rests in the desert. And when pilgrims are people who are on a religious pilgrimage, they're able to go through the deserts. And as they go through the desert, they can stop at an oasis and get refreshed and get renewed. The church ought to be an oasis, because you're walking through life's deserts, and life's deserts are harsh and dry. The sands of life, if you're not careful, will literally destroy you. And you just don't have the ability to deal with it all by yourself. That's why you need God. You need God to help you to wrestle with the sandstorms of life's deserts. But we ought to be able to stop at the oasis no matter what's been coming into your life and what's been challenging your life, we ought to be able to stop in the oasis. And here we ought to be able to meet our God and get a refreshing for our souls. The beauty of David, even with the mistakes that King David made, David realized the importance of having his own house. So he calls Nathan the prophet and told him, "Lo, I dwell in a house of cedars." I want you to understand, Nathan, I realize I now no longer, as the king, have to live in a tent. I now have been blessed not just to have a house of wood, but I now have a house of cedar. And I have a problem because I'm living in a house of cedar, but the ark of the Lord still remains under curtains. We ought to want God's house to be the most beautiful place. And David realized the importance of how God's house and what it was, because it was essential that they meet God. When we read about David dancing out of his clothes, and Michelle, his wife, seen him dancing out of his clothes, it was not because he was trying to show off. It was because David knew the importance of bringing the Ark of the Covenant, which had been out of Israel for 20 years, which meant that God was not present with the people. And God, even after he lost his number one assistant for trying to bring the ark out the wrong way, he finally is able to get the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem, and he is so thankful until he doesn't care about his position. He doesn't care about his status. He doesn't care because he's the king. All he cares about, I'm able to get the Ark of the Covenant where it's supposed to be. So he just started shouting and praising God. Sometimes you have to forget about your environment, forget about friends, forget about folks, and get your mind in tune to God, because Jesus is the answer to your problem. He's the answer to your challenge, and we've got to learn how to put God first.